The villain of this villa is not on the cast. The villain is absolutely production.
Reality TV, by and large, like doesn't have a politics. It has a desire to make money, and so it will allow anything that it thinks will make it money, and it will disallow anything that it thinks will get in the way of it making money. Hey, everybody. Welcome to The Wait and the Wonder. I'm Jason Herndon. I'm a licensed clinical psychologist.
And I am Felicia Ross. I am a licensed clinical social worker and licensed mental health professional.
This is where we take what's buzzing in pop culture and relationships, look at it through our therapist eyes, not to diagnose the internet, but to explore the nuance that gets lost in hot takes.
Because usually there is more to the story. And today we're talking about Love Island USA. But not the way that the internet is getting into it, right? The villain of this villa is not on the cast. The villain is absolutely production.
We have so
Yeah,
much to get into. So,
we
as
do.
a quick reminder,
Yes.
while we are both licensed therapists, we are not your therapists. And this is not a substitute for therapy. If you need support, you should seek professional.
Please,
All right.
please. And we can have, places that you can find a professional to link up with in the show notes from
Absolutely.
directories and numbers, etc. So make sure to look in the show notes.
Yeah.
Okay. I am an
Before,
OG Love Island watcher,
well,
right?
wait,
I do.
before we get into Love Island,
Yeah.
how are you doing outside of session?
Oh my gosh. Yeah, you're right. You're right. I was just so excited. You're
I
right.
know. Love Island on the brain.
It really is on the brain.
Yep.
I know you're not caught up to the last episode, but we'll talk about that.
I certainly am not.
Out of session, there's a lot happening. I think
Yeah.
there's a lot. And I think how I'm navigating all of it is just recognizing that it's okay to not be okay with all the things. It's okay to not be okay. And I do feel for mental health therapists during this time because I do know the summer slump is upon us and maybe folks have been feeling that from a month or so earlier. Insurance companies are banding together and just doing some really shady stuff. And so I think it's really hard time to be a licensed mental health professional, not just because of the socioeconomic political climate outside, but also how that stuff outside is impacting how things are being done in our field. So yeah, I'm just trying to roll with the punches, but there's been a lot of punches and it's hard. How are you?
So many punches. Same. We've had many conversations between
We have.
recordings.
We
Yeah, I
have.
think I'm moving through a season of change,
Yeah.
right? That's requiring a lot of patience from me, a lot more patience than I expected
Yeah.
it to require.
Yeah.
I'm navigating a lot more feelings that I personally like. I know I'm a therapist and I love for you to navigate your feelings. I would prefer not to navigate my feelings ever. And so that my feelings are not cooperating in this moment.
Yeah.
Yeah. So just, dealing with a little burnout, dealing with a little, change
Yeah.
fatigue and just, decision fatigue, but trying to build a system that feels more sustainable, more
More succinct.
realistic. Yeah.
All the fatigue. Yeah, I'm
Hmm.
aligning with you there. There's a lot of fatigue in the air, and so I am very excited for the weather to shift, right? I know you don't like to be
Yes.
outside, but I do.
I don't love it, but we did go to the beach last weekend, so that was really great.
I love
So
that
we
for
went down to
you.
visit a great friend of mine from grad school, also a fellow psychologist, and see her and her family, and yeah, go to the beach. So we had a great time in South
You were
Carolina.
outside? You stayed
For a
outside?
short while, I was outside.
I'm
Yes.
very proud of you.
I mean, thank you. I deserve that. Please clap. Yeah.
Yes. For those that don't know, Jason does not care for outside.
Yeah, if you want to know me as a person, there are two important facts to start with. Fact number one is I do not
Yeah.
like onions in any form. And fact number two is I don't particularly enjoy being outside.
Yeah,
I'm from
definitely.
Texas, where you just burn to death. And so why would you spend time outside if you could
Burned
be
to death
inside?
is like
Hmm.
really like that was
Hmm.
yeah, burned to death
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
wow.
Honestly, I got these degrees so I wouldn't have to work outside.
That's fair.
Yeah.
Fair.
Hmm.
Yeah. And summer is not the best time for me either for my chronic illnesses, so it is
Yeah.
harder to be outside, which is sucky. So for those who are navigating chronic illnesses, I feel for you guys. I feel for you friends. My other chronically ill baddies. It's a difficult time. yeah, we got to pick and choose, stick and move. So I definitely am wishing everyone ease as we go into the summer solstice, right?
Absolutely.
Because it's almost officially summer in a couple days. All right, it's Love Island time?
It's Love Island time. Felicia TV
It
strikes
is.
again.
This is yeah. It's my week to pick a topic, and I picked Love Island. And I'm gonna apologize, right? Because I am an OG. I am gonna apologize because this season is not giving what I think I wish it gave. And so this was not the best season for me to tell you to start watching. I actually
Yeah.
probably should have asked you to start with a different season. I think you would have been more engaged. But I do owe you and your wife like a gourmet dinner when you guys come to the area. I know I do. Because when
We are owed.
you text me, you were like, what? I
Right.
said,
Really
yeah, yeah,
did.
yeah, yeah. I'm so sorry. You definitely were like, what the like, Felicia? I was like, I forgot to tell you to skip the dance sequence. And you were like,
The
yes.
dance sequence. Why? For what reason? Why are we doing this? So for to catch people up, I, unlike Felicia, am not an OG Love Islander. I had never seen a single episode of Love Island until I watched the first season or the first episode of season 8
I'm really sorry.
last week, maybe. And it has, I mean, it truly has lived in our home rent free ever since we watched it. I'm talking about it constantly. My wife is talking about it constantly. Wild, wild time.
That's what happens when you
Mhm.
watch it.
Yeah,
Welcome.
not in a positive way, not in a let's watch more way, but in like
N-
a why.
Why does this exist way?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I'm really
Yeah.
sorry. I definitely have been a OG Love Island watcher since UK. I'm in it. I don't really watch the After Sun, but I am because Sierra's on it this season, so I'm very excited for that. And I promise you this is not the OG Love Island. There's so much happening. But before we judge a single islander, I think we get to talk about who built the room that they're in.
Absolutely.
So I'll start here. I stand on business that production is the villain of the villa, like consistently, right?
Mhm.
I think everything that we watch, we have to remember is manufactured. It's a manufactured artifact, the environment plus the edit. So when the audience reads one of the Islanders' whole character off the screen, you're doing the exact thing the format is built to make them do, right? When we blame, it's called the fundamental attribution error, right? When we blame somebody's character for what they do and ignore the situation that they're in. And we constantly find ourselves here,
Mhm.
right? Because at the end of the day, you're watching attachment styles, you're watching people's languages, how they communicate. You may be getting triggered yourself because maybe how someone communicates or a particular situation is reminding you of a situation that you've been in. We were talking a little bit before the show of like how like, ooh, I don't know if like I would be on a show like this, right?
Oh,
Like I
I know.
don't. Oh yes, you said you know.
I
I
know.
I
I would not, but I just
er,
am not built to watch someone I am interested in
mm,
make out with somebody else while I like wait my turn. And say whatever you want about me. I'm jealous, I'm this, I'm whatever. That's fine. Right? I'm not that guy.
also, the kissing this season in particular,
So much tongue.
I
Like an
don't
obscene amount of tongue. And I'm not a
it's
prude, right? Like,
no, it's just it's
but
just a
it's a
lot.
lot of
Kisses used to mean something on
right.
Love Island, and this season it's just like that went out the window.
Mm-mm.
That's
They're
gone.
all free and they're all
But
very
they're all
wet.
free, but also not free at the same time. I don't know. So if we wake it up and go back to the production, let
Yeah.
me talk about the environment. Right, the
Yes.
Islanders wake up on the production schedule. They lose sleep, and then I do know that they can only drink a certain amount. Right, but they do also have wine. One night of bad sleep is going to crank up the brain's emotional alarm
Hmm.
and will weaken the part that puts the brakes on when you're trying to like think through things, right? If you add alcohol to the mix from time to time, you're going to get manufactured dysregulation,
Mhm. Yeah.
which the reads on the camera as drama. And what you're going to see is how a person responds when they're dysregulated. And then what happens is that we as America, because we do get to vote, we do get to put judgments on people and kind of have this godlike intervention
Mhm.
almost. We then are reading this drama as them as characters, like as their
Yeah.
whole characters, who they are. And so I don't know, and I don't think that you can starve someone of sleep, hand them a drink, and then say, yeah. this is your personality, when in reality, it's your nervous system reacting.
I think that that is really a point that bears repeating, right? Which is, I think the way that reality TV works, at least now, maybe it didn't used to, right? But
Uh-huh.
the way that reality TV works now is that they are essentially scripted in a way that we think that these are natural, organic interactions that these
Yeah.
people are having with one another, when in reality, they are really corralled into these reactions, right?
Mhm.
I don't know if you remember that there was I think he was on Big Brother,
Mm.
and maybe sued the show or
Mm-mm, I didn't
sued
know.
or he was on some reality show, and I think he sued the show basically for, like, treating him badly, right? Like, they
Mm,
took his phone, right? They plied him with alcohol, right? They denied him water, according to him and his lawsuit. They, like, denied him multiple meals a day, right? Like, they are really doing a lot that they can behind the scenes to kind of shape these
yeah.
interactions, these crash outs that we have come to love, right, on
Yeah.
reality TV.
Mhm. Yeah, I think that's absolutely correct, and I think when they then go in and edit, it finishes the job, right? So,
Absolutely.
we've already seen on this season of Love Island, for those who are caught up, that there are conversations that obviously were missing, right? So, Sean, the first dumped islander was Sean, the second dumped islander was Beatrice, and Sean was very clear that he really liked Anaya. We really, as viewers, didn't get to see that very much. If any,
Mhm.
what we did get to see was him and Kenzie connecting, or at least what we thought they were connecting. And then when he was off, when he got booted off and sat on AfterSun, and then has since like got his phone back and has been talking to the to people, has been like, no, I pulled Anaya all the time. I pulled her. I told her that I liked her, that I was attracted to her, that I wanted to explore her. And she was basically good where she was at, but we didn't see
Hmm.
any of that. And so, this is like, I think it's called Frankenbiting, where editors will stitch words from different moments together to make someone say something that they never actually said, or to present it as if they said it in a particular context. Right.
Mm.
And
Mhm.
I think that that's just an industry practice. So I wonder how often we have thought a reality star was trash before we remember, like, maybe the environment that they were a part of. Right.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, I get curious about that. I get curious if anyone has any reality stars that they really enjoy, that they're like, you know what? I didn't think about the environment that they were in, but I labeled them
Yeah.
a particular way. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that that's such an interesting thing, and it's something I think about often, which is
Mhm.
sort of where does the real you and the character
Uh,
that you were encouraged and reinforced to play
mhm.
on TV begin and end? Right? And then, like, where does that process sort of take on a life of its own, right? So
Yeah.
it's like, I think you could make a solid argument that the housewives were playing characters, right? Caricatures of themselves in the early seasons.
Mhm.
But once some of them and their realistic personalities got a lot of attention, then I think you start pulling for people who are genuinely behaving in that way,
Yeah.
right? And then
Yeah.
the wildness explodes.
Yeah, shout out to Nene Leakes, who's actually in the
Truly,
African
icon. Yeah.
American iconic. She's in the
Hmm.
African American History
Yeah.
Museum, actually. Her
Mhm.
quotes. So, always will be iconic, but I do think that right, like, just the personality and then being like, "Oh, this is what you like? Okay, let me turn it up even more and even more and even more." Even though there's other facets to this person, it's like, "Well, this is what the people wanna see," and so now we have a character.
Mhm.
I then think about the emotional intelligence aspect of it, right? Like,
Yeah.
this is how it was said versus what was said. Like, so in this was before Beatrice got kicked out, or
Mhm.
even like, yeah, I think so. I think this was before Beatrice got kicked out. There's a bombshell comes in, Corbin comes in, right? I don't remember what episode at this point, but he comes in, and the idea, because Kenzie is the one who's left without someone by this point, is that, hey, she'll have first stab at it. Again, we don't see that this conversation is happening with all the girls.
Mhm.
As Corbin is speaking, Melanie says, I want to pull you for a chat, right? In the middle of him, like, talking to all the girls, getting to know them. He's like, oh, okay, right? Beatrice immediately gets irritated, is like, come on, like, like, why are we doing this? And Beatrice is trying to just make the point of like, hey, like, I just found that a little disrespectful. And then it escalates, right? Again, we're seeing this in the I think by the time they're having this conversation, it's in the evening or
Okay.
something. So I'm already thinking like, well, they got out of a challenge that's very like elevated. Like they just had to do physical things, then had to come back, get changed or whatever they had to do. And now they're, talking. Who knows what the environment was like? Who knows how much sleep they got the previous night? So yeah, that's going to develop some sort of frustrating tension point. But I do think when I'm thinking of how emotional intelligence is being scored, right? Because you have to compare it to the environment. And what I mean by emotional intelligence, for those who may not know, I mean it's the ability to read, use, understand, and manage emotion. It is
Yeah.
very state dependent, right? It's not a fixed score. So the way that you may respond when you're calm is not the way that you're going to respond when you're emotionally heightened, right?
Hmm.
So when I'm watching like this scene, I'm like, oh, well, there's already this heightened energy. And now I'm thinking like, I don't even know if they can actually hear one another. Right. And then all of a sudden, this is where we get the first meme of the season, which is, give me 10, give me 10, give me 10, where Melanie's walking around the whole villa, like pretty hyped up on Mountain Dew and saying, give me 10.
I don't think I said anything crazy. I'm not going back to the
No,
cat.
that's crazy.
She's nervous, right?
Give me 10. Give me 10. I didn't know she was that sensitive. Give me 10. Give me 10. Give me 10.
Yeah. I think a couple of things come up for me. One is just the idea that emotional intelligence is also a developmental process,
It is. Yeah.
right? And these folks are so young,
Mm.
right? I think on average they're somewhere between like 22 and maybe 26. I think like
I
Bryce's
think
would
it's
be
like
29,
29. Yeah. I think Bryce
but
might
he's
be
kind
the
of the
older one.
outlier, which comes up as a plot point about how old he is, and my old ass is like, oh, for
I'm
real?
like, oh,
Okay, great.
yeah.
All right, 29. Okay, grandpa. Right. But I think that, that struck me too, right? It takes many of us a lifetime
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
develop emotional intelligence in a way that is functional and then can expand into relational intelligence.
Uh-huh.
Right. And these folks are so young. They are really still
They're
developing,
really
right? A lot
babies.
of their ideas about what it means to be in long term serious relationships. They're just so young, right?
I think that's a good point, and I wanna point out, like, a lot of times when I'm watching these shows, I have to remember, I'm just like, "Have you guys had a serious relationship yet?" Like,
Hmm.
it was very interesting because they had the trivia game that they played, and we find out that Gabrielle, who is another bombshell that comes in and is coupled up with Beatrice at that time, like, that he has been with older women, right? And I think the oldest woman he had been with was, like, in her 50s, and we're like, "Okay," and then Beatrice also or Bea also, was like, "Yeah, I've dated older men. I don't think I've ever dated anyone my own age." And
Hmm.
so I do, sometimes this idea of what does it mean to be matched with someone is not always a like chronological age thing, right?
Hmm.
And also I get curious about like what do you guys talk about? Do you guys talk? Or is it purely like just a physical thing? Because like you said, these are really young people. And I'm not saying that young folks have not gone through things because, when you're, I didn't go through COVID when I was in my 20s. I didn't go through, right? I didn't like, I mean,
Hmm.
as millennials, I think we've gone through everything, but
A great deal.
it's tiring. We're
Yeah.
tired, right? And I don't know what it means to date in this landscape and to like
Yeah.
desire connection and to hope that someone can match with you. But I do think that that's a really good point that they are really young, right? They're in their 20s. Some of them just graduated like a week ago before coming out to Fiji. So to go from that and then to come onto a show and then people are expecting you to be this level of emotional intelligence or hoping that you are
Hmm.
is very interesting to me when I watch the
Yeah.
show because I'm just like, actually, developmentally, like, it's okay that they're not there, but how much people want them to be there or expect them to be there, yeah,
Yeah.
there's a lot of
Yeah. I
expectations.
think that that's right, and I think that to add on to that, we cannot divorce what is happening from the context within which it is
Yes.
happening, right? And so, building connection with other people. Do I like you? Do you like me? Like, what does that mean? Like, when are we
Mhm.
ready to take, like, to put sex on the table, like right? That's a challenging process in isolation, right? It's even more challenging in front of cameras, in front of other people, in front of other men and women who are theoretically competing for what you've got,
Yeah.
right? In
And I
front
mean,
of
to me,
people who, I mean, they're all very young. They're also all objectively very attractive,
mhm,
right? Like in front of people who are always in a two-piece bikini, right? Just always, all
constantly,
the time,
all the time with shirts
right?
off. And I was like, I don't
Yeah,
care if I only see them wear clothes at night. I'm like, "Oh, yeah,
right. And so I think that like it's also right. They're also working to build these connections, whether
yeah,
they're good at it or not, right? Whether they've had meaningful relationships up to this point or
yeah,
not. They're also working to build these connections under this public eye and not
yeah,
even yes, there is the diffuse kind of Truman Show. We know that everyone is watching at home,
yes,
right? Kind of
yes.
layer. But then there's
Hmm.
also like there are actual people here sitting across from me watching me make out, right? Watching me try and build connection, watching me get rejected, right? All at the same time. And so then we sprinkle in this idea of like
Yep.
emotional intelligence on top of that, and it all kind of falls apart.
It does. And so I think this is a good space to talk about like neuroception because
Uh huh.
you're like what you're talking about, like you're being watched. Also, they're being sleep deprived. Also, they're in competition. That is going to keep your nervous system stuck in a low grade threat response,
Hmm.
right? Because you're always having to be activated at any time. So that's going to make people misread like neutral cues probably as a little bit more dangerous than they actually are. So neuroception is basically like your nervous system is constantly scanning for safety or danger before your conscious mind can even catch up.
Hmm.
Right. So you're
Yeah.
not necessarily going to get a lot of responding. What you're going to get is a no, you have me fucked up, actually, a reaction.
Hmm. Yeah.
Right.
Right.
And I do think so. The biggest kind of storyline, right, like right now, is Sincere, Melanie, and a bombshell comes in called Soul, right?
Okay.
So Melanie and Sincere couple up from since the beginning.
I saw that.
You said you did see that
It's like the
because
one
you
thing I
you
saw.
watched it.
Yep.
That's the one thing you saw. So, and when Corbin comes in, there's Melanie is kind of in this very unique position because Corbin is her type, Melanie
Hmm.
is Corbin's type. And let me remind everyone who may not be an OG Love Island watcher, the goal is to find the best connection, right? Why this season is so difficult to watch from my perspective is that everyone seems to couple up and then just stay there, right? So by the time that I think Soul, Jen, and the other boy's name is Caleb come in, which Caleb was, and we do know this also, let me add this caveat, production picks the bombshells because they know the types of the Islanders, right?
Hmm.
They do go through what is your type, what do you like, what is it that you're seeking? And then before you know it, a bombshell comes in and wow, that's my type. On paper, that's my type. Right. So we see this very interesting dynamic first with Corbin because Soul and the other two come in later. So we see this dynamic with Melanie and Sincere. Corbin comes in and the boys are like, whoa. Corbin is, attractive man, 6 foot something, lighter skin. I think he says he's Asian and black, so he's multiracial, Asian, black, and Jamaican, multiracial. So, I mean, gorgeous person, right?
Sure.
Comes
Yeah.
into, and he's asking everybody for a kiss. Again, kisses used to mean something, but he's connecting with people. He connects with Melanie. Melanie does not kiss him. And we get to a competition or a challenge. And in that challenge specifically, Melanie is kissing. They're blindfolded and they have to find their mate. Like they have to find their couple, right? So they're
By
all
kissing.
blind. The girls are blind. Yeah, the girls are blindfolded. The guys are handcuffed to this big bed and they
Keep
have to
going. Don't
yeah,
mind me.
and they have to find their couple, right? And so as they're blindfolded, the bombshells also come in and they kiss so much kissing. They kiss every, yeah, right, Islander. So it's very interesting to me because you watch Melanie have to get on the bed. And once you find your person, you're supposed to handcuff yourself to them. So she goes through people and they all try to, except for Anaya, they all are like kissing to see who it is.
Okay.
She gets to Sincere, who is next to Corbin. She kisses Sincere. Now, mind you, Sincere we call sacred because of his hair. So we
He's
call
got great hair.
he has great hair. So you can feel and you see her feel the hair. She kisses him. She goes to Corbin. She kisses him. She goes back and forth. On camera, it
Does
looks like
Corbin have the same great hair?
mm-mm.
Okay.
No, no, Corbin does not have the same low fade, like,
Hmm. Just
little fro,
regular. Yeah.
regular.
Yeah.
And I'm like, and also Sincere is shorter. So you gotta climb, I mean, you have to mount Corbin a little bit.
I'm sure. I'm
You
sure
got to
you did.
mount him a little bit to get over there. So I'm just like, so she goes back and forth quite a few times, right? Between Corbin, Sincere, to the point where even I'm like, okay, girl, you're dragging it a little, right? It's now you're dragging it. And you can see Sincere get frustrated. Soul walks in, beautiful girl. Beautiful, beautiful girl. Like she eats. Generational face card, generational body. I mean, she eats so bad that Michael B. Jordan liked her photo. So, hey,
Well,
yeah,
there we
go
go.
get that wherever you are. So,
Hmm.
yeah,
We love that for you.
we love that for actually really do. So, just saying, she comes in. And so now there's this triangle, right? Now, Melanie, who has already kind of had these moments where she has been a little irritated, been a little frustrated, and Sincere is kind of like, hey, like, I don't really know. I'm not really sure. Like, it doesn't seem like she really like respects me or she doesn't really like me, and again, we're on Love Island where your goal is to find the best connection.
Right.
So this, the Islanders are all kind of doing this thing where it's like we want to couple up and like be lock and key. Soul comes in, and again, production, don't know what they did, but we're not really seeing anyone interested in Soul except for Sincere,
Hmm.
right? So Sincere is talking to Soul. Now, the issue that I'm seeing is that Sincere is lying to Melanie while exploring Soul. And then America has a say. They say, who do you want the bombshells to couple up with? America chooses Soul and Sincere to couple up, leaving Melanie in
America
a
is
couple.
messy.
America is messy, leaving Melanie in a couple with Corbin. But by this time, Corbin is already exploring Kenzie. A bombshell comes in for Kenzie. Now there's a love triangle somehow between Kenzie, Corbin, and Melanie.
Hmm.
And what it looks like is that Soul and Sincere are hitting it off.
Yeah.
We get to the episode from a couple of nights ago. Everyone has to write a letter. I'm skipping over a
Oh,
lot, but
sure, that was
everyone
great.
has to write, yeah, everyone has to write a letter, right? And so I'm thinking like, okay, Melanie is probably going to end up hurt because I could see that she was going to write the letter to Sincere. Now, I did like her and Corbin together, but Corbin and Kenzie are doing this weird thing with each other where they're kissing, but they're still saying Corbin is still trying to be respectful to Melanie. Kenzie's getting jealous of Melanie and saying like, oh, you're considering her feelings and not mine. And he's like, we are in a new couple. We are supposed to be exploring. And she was like, well, I don't know. I have to consider other people's feelings. And I'm like, it is okay to not kiss for one day, like for a whole
It is
24 hours.
okay. And
It's
I
okay.
think as you're talking about this and sort of describing all this to me, what continues to come up for me
Yep.
is this added layer of context, which all of these dating shows love to pretend doesn't exist. And
Yes,
that is this. These people do not know each other, right? The whole show is 6 weeks long,
I think so.
right? Like,
Yeah.
I would venture that 95 to 99% of the things that these people have done with each other, they would have never done out in the world 6 weeks
No,
in,
no.
right? Like, and it's not just that you don't know the person that you're coupled with, right? It's also that you don't actually know the other women on the show, the other men on the show. You don't
Mm-mm.
have real relationships with any of these
Mm-mm.
people.
Mm-mm. And while you are obviously it's a container, right? It's a social experiment.
Of
We are
course.
watching a social experiment in real time. We
Yes.
are
Uh-huh.
watching how quickly do people attach? Are those attachments real? Are they deep? And can it really last outside of the show? And we have seen that it has worked, right? In season 6, we have that with Serena and Cordell. We have that with Leah and Miguel. And Leah and Miguel connected against production's wishes. I mean, I think if anyone has been the most outspoken about production, it has been Leah and Miguel, where they basically told production, we're going to talk to each other. So if you want to kick us off the show, fine, we could go, but we're going to go together. That
Mm-hmm.
wouldn't have been good for production. Why? Because Leah came out as the standout star of that season. So I think sometimes what happens, and this is why I say production is the villain, because I'm like, some of these things that are happening do feel very crafted. It feels very confusing, and the behavior
Yeah.
feels very disjointed. So as I'm
Mm-hmm.
explaining this to you, I'm explaining it to say like a lot of how we're seeing these love triangles and new life and right is because essentially I think what production may be realizing, maybe particularly with this season, is that the cast is a bit of a dud. Everyone is
Mm,
playing it very, very, very safe. No one is really doing the experiment or doing what they're meant to do on Love Island, which is be selfish, go after who you want, and explore. right? Make sure that you are in the couple for you, and let's see what that does. Let's see what it's like to date. Let's see what it's like to be in a relationship. Let's see where your mindset is at when it comes to dating, right? And so at some point, production has to have a villain. And
Oh, of
so
course. Yeah.
insincere, as people are calling him, which he is insincere. And I don't even think he's insincere because he wants to be insincere. I think that this also shows us what people are struggling with when it comes to their interpersonal relationships.
Mhm.
So, as a therapist, it's very clear to me that Sincere struggles to be sincere when he doesn't want someone to get hurt. And while his intentions may be good, I think when his back is against the wall, he projects. And then when people pleasing doesn't work anymore, he projects, and he does not at any cost want to be this quote unquote villain.
Mhm.
Right. So we see
Mhm.
that in real time. I
Oh, of
think
course. Yeah.
after they realize America is voting, it's like, oh, right, America is watching us every day. Melanie, a lot of the things that happened in the first couple of episodes, that behavior turned around 360, very chill, right? We saw
Mhm.
her. One thing I do have to give Melanie is like, I do see that she tries to regulate herself a lot, right? So it is very abnormal to sleep in a bed with someone who it's like you were sleeping in a bed with one person and now you're sleeping with another bed. So now, of course, the storyline is like, oh, she's doing too much. She wants too much attention. And I was like, no, I think she wants to regulate. I don't want to sleep in a bed with someone who I already know has a connection over here while I'm also watching this person who I was coupled up with and we've said all these things to each other be with this other person.
Yeah. I think that the couples therapist in me is sort of
Yep.
screaming right at the idea that I'm trying to find my person while watching my person actively pursue other people
Pursue other
and be
people.
pursued by other people. Right. And
Hmm.
I think many, though not all of us, are mature enough to acknowledge that our partners have had relationships with other people outside of us.
To watch it as something different.
Yeah, right. To have
Yeah.
that play out under our eyes, to have that play out simultaneously. I'm
Yes.
trying to build a relationship with her and she's trying to build a relationship with him and or he's trying to build a relationship with her at the same time I am. Like that is generally not the way, right?
Yeah.
At some point, one or more of those people would just tap out
Yep.
of that situation altogether and just say like, I don't know what you're doing or who you want to do it with, but like, it's not me. I'm out.
I do think that this is what's interesting about this. And Soul said this at because she did unfortunately get dumped. She
Mm,
was just like, you guys put me out of my misery because none of you guys were open to exploring me, and they weren't. I do not think that this is a show for folks who think that dating has to go a certain way. If you are not open enough to think about dating as something that could be multifaceted, if you think that you need to be the chosen one at all times, and I do think that that's what this is kind of giving, right? Because
mm,
a lot of
hmm.
the women on the show, except for Bia, has been very focused on like wanting to be first. I want to be chosen. I want to be the one. And I'm like, well, then maybe you needed to be on Love is Blind because at least you wouldn't have to necessarily see it, even though you still have to kind of hear about them dating other people. You guys are
Yeah.
still building your own connection behind a wall, and right, it's your connection that you have with that particular person. And you guys, it does get messy, not saying it doesn't. But if this is, Love Island is particularly about, we are all here to find the best connections and we are going to be uncomfortable and step on other people's toes to do that.
Yeah, that's interesting.
That's the goal of the show. And so I think from my perspective, I don't necessarily know, and why people are saying this show is a dud, and what I will keep saying is that this is not necessarily a show for the folks who are like, I want to meet a person, I want to date that person, I want to see if it works out, and then if it doesn't, okay, fine.
So, your average person.
Your average
It's just
person.
not a show for your average person.
It's not just, it's really
Yeah.
not. It's not a show to go
Yeah.
on for your average person. And I do think that a lot of these folks, I was like, I don't, and everyone's like, I didn't think that I was going to come in and make a connection this fast. And I'm like, well, I don't know if you guys actually do have a deep, true connection because we
Mhm.
really don't know much about you.
Yeah, so you said that earlier and it really made me think, right? Are these connections true, real, and deep, right? I think they can
Yeah.
be true and I think that they can be real, but I think depth isn't something that you can force.
Mm,
It is something that is a product of time, right?
yes. Yeah.
And so there is really no way to form a sufficiently deep connection with another person
Mm,
in a week. right? And when we talk
Yeah.
about, I met this person and our connection was really intense and really deep, I think what we mean, I'm not dissuading that, right? Or discounting
Yeah.
that. What I'm saying is, I think like those connections are deep relative to other connections that developed over the same length of time. Right. Those connections
That's a
are
good
not
point.
deep, relative to like, oh, I've known this person and been with this person for 6 months. Right.
Yeah.
Or, my in laws have been together for like, I don't know, 50 years or something like that. Right. And so it's like, there is no like artificial replication of their level of depth with each other.
Mm.
Right.
So I
Like,
guess no, sorry to cut you off, but I guess my
mhm.
question then would be, if they are around each other, because you are the expert in this, you are the couples.
Am
You
I?
are the couples therapist, yeah.
I am the couples therapist. Love
You are
Island
the
is throwing
couples
me, but
therapist.
yeah.
This is you as the expert. If like what does could depth be super deep if they are around each other basically 24/7, no phone? Because again, they don't have access to their phones while they're here, right? They have
Yeah.
access to no social media. They can't talk to anyone. They can only talk to each other.
Hmm.
So what do you think depth can kind of develop like that in this kind of pressure cooker where they are around each other 24/7 all the time?
Yes, I think the depth can develop in that kind of situation. And I think in many ways it has to because you're
Mm,
isolated, right? And
mhm,
because you're cloistered, right? So we don't have the regular, like, oh, we dated, right? We had dinner, we were together for 2 hours, 3 hours, whatever it was. And then I went back to work, right? Or you went back
yeah.
to work and we went back to our separate apartments, right? And we didn't see each other for however many days between, when we saw each other. So I do think you're putting in a lot more time with
Mm,
one another
mhm,
than you would naturally. And I think that will bring in a higher level of depth than is usual for a 6 week period. And at the same time, right, like you also are not seeing each other in your natural environment, right? You don't know each other's friends, right? You don't know each other's families. You don't particularly like, you don't know what I look like after a day of work. I don't mean physically, right? But just like you don't know what I act like, how I feel, right? After a day of work in my job, right? You don't know
yeah.
what it's like after I have a phone call with my brother, right? You don't know, right? So there is some depth, but I think it's like the places that are deep and shallow are more fragmented, is what I would imagine,
Mm,
right? Is that there's not a true consistent sense of depth, right? That you would develop over time, right? In a more naturally occurring relationship, right? There are
mhm,
certain things that are super deep, right? And then there
mhm.
are other things that you have no clue about, no sense about.
Yeah. And so I think that lets us zoom in on the micro level.
Yeah.
If I were to zoom out and I'm looking at these dynamics from a race, colorism, gender, and maybe a little
Yeah.
bit of class level,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
This is where production to me truly becomes the biggest villain of the villa. And I say that because by the show's own framing, this is one of its most diverse casts, with 5 Black and POC Islanders, and the
Okay.
cast reveal photos got dragged for like bad lighting for the darker skinned Islanders before the
Oh,
season even aired. It did.
yeah.
It did. So I have to hold on to both, right? There is more Black people in the villa and more non-Black POCs in the villa, and there is still anti-Blackness still running inside the villa and also running alongside like what we are shown and how things move together. So I think one thing to talk about first is the intersectionality of this all, right? So
Yeah.
intersectionality is this idea that race, gender, class, and disability don't take turns. They hit at the same time. When we see episode 1, which you saw, right?
Yes.
So we saw the door challenge. We saw that Casey, a dark skinned man, said out loud that he was scared no woman would pick his door, right? And he was correct. Like every woman, including the 2 darker skinned women, stood behind lighter skinned men's doors. Now, again, what I will say is like that could have also been that Casey didn't necessarily pick the most favorable answers because everybody had to just,
Yeah.
yeah, just, I don't know. He didn't pick the favorable answers. So I could say that, that may not necessarily be just colorism. That could just be Casey not being strategic, I guess, with his answers because he thought he was being
Yeah, sure.
funny. I don't know. Right.
Hmm.
But I think
Well, I think he was trying to be strategic. It just didn't work, right?
that's
Because he
true.
said like, "Oh, I think women like plants," and so I'm going to say that I like plants, but then like none of those women like
And
plants.
they were like, no.
You know?
I think we're also seeing this when we talk about a Kenzie versus an Anaya, right? And how much
Mm,
grace we are giving Anaya over a Kenzie or over a lighter skinned woman on the cast, like a Melanie, right? So, Anaya and Casey have had a conflict. people are calling an eye insecure. People are, talking about how there's colorism and how we don't have a lot of grace for dark skinned women. We do have a piece where Casey is very honest with Anaya and said, like, hey, like, I love the fact that you're darker skin. And I was like, yeah, that used to bother me when I was younger, but it doesn't bother me anymore. Like, I'm comfortable in my skin.
Hmm.
Whereas some people were like, oh, like, why does this have to kind of be forced upon us to like, for us to remember that dark skinned women need to be acknowledged. And someone was like, in every lifetime, I think that they would have to be acknowledged because of the undertones of colorism and because, quite frankly, of enslavement in this country. Right. And how
Absolutely.
we view darker skinned people in the paper bag test. Like all these aren't made up things. Like these are all a part of our history, whether people are like it or not.
Yeah. I
These
think
are
that
things that happened. Yeah.
that makes sense. I think just actually to just pause for a moment and say, like, for people who maybe don't know what Felicia's talking about, we talk
Yeah.
about paper bag tests, is that historically there had been, thanks to colorism,
Yeah.
there were what were called paper bag clubs for Black people, right? And
Mhm.
so the idea was if you were darker than the shade of a paper bag, then
Mhm.
you were less likely to pass as white and you were not allowed to be in this club, right? This club was like a light skin only club,
Yeah.
right? And that colorism has persisted throughout our community and many other communities of color,
Yep. Yep.
right? Kind of agnostic to whatever's happening
It
outside,
really
like to
is.
us as a group,
It
right? Yeah.
really
So
is.
colorism is often an internal challenge that many communities of color are navigating, wrestling
Yeah.
with at all times. Yeah.
Yeah, colorism is basically, as Jason broke down, it's the prejudice based on skin tone,
Hmm.
right? Where lighter skin gets treated as more beautiful and more worthy, even within the same racial demographics and ethnic demographics, right? And you are correct. We see this across, it's not just in, the Black community. This is most people of color's communities as well, where
Hmm.
you will see a lighter skinned person be treated very differently than a darker skinned person. And
Yeah.
so I think of that. I think of how we use language when we're talking about a darker skinned islander versus a lighter skinned islander, specifically when it comes to empathy and grace and understanding. Would Melanie or Soul, who is right considerably lighter skin, like be considered annoying if they did the same behavior as Anaya?
Mm.
Would we frame them in the same way? I'm not really sure. And I think that when we talk about gender, like again, I keep seeing, especially in this season, the women almost fighting for men, right?
Mhm.
When we get to the letter challenge, essentially Soul and Melanie are they both put a letter in Sincere's mailbox. So you see Sincere in the middle and these two women on the other side of him, like pouring out their feelings to him and basically begging him them to
Mhm.
for him to pick them. Yeah.
Mhm.
I think that that made me a bit uncomfortable when it came to the dumping on last night. Boys were responsible for what girl to keep. The women were responsible for what man to keep. And it's not like they haven't done that before. But, just in this there's this kind of ideal of, what how a woman is supposed to get a man, right? And we kind of see in Melanie's confessional, her first one is she's like, yeah, I'll if I find my person, I'm gonna give him all the babies. I'll have all the babies with him. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. Where I was
That
kind of
was
like,
I'm glad you brought that
yeah,
up. That was so
yeah,
interesting to me because there was this sort of like very consistent message in the first group of
yeah,
women, right? As
yep.
they were introducing themselves.
Hmm.
One, it was they love men, right? That's not a bad thing,
Very
but
men
it was
centered. Yeah.
important to say for each
Hmm.
of them to say, like, I love men.
Yeah.
Two, I want to have babies,
Yes.
right? I'm looking to find a man who I love, right? Yes, as a man, but also as a partner, and that will give me babies, right? And then three, and this one was the one that was really interesting to me, right? Is that I'm a girl's girl, right? I love and support other women and will not basically like break the rules of feminism for some man, right? And we see that begin to crumble almost instantly,
Almost immediately.
right? And I don't say that as a
Yeah.
criticism of any of these women,
Mm-mm.
right?
Mm-mm.
I say that as like, this is the system under which they are, they have placed themselves, right? So their
Uh-huh.
responsibility is that they have agreed to be in the system,
Yep.
right? Where the system consistently pits them against each other
Hmm.
in service of a man, right? Like
Hmm.
Bechdel must be like
Mhm.
furious, right?
I love that you said that because my read on this was so interesting to me because when a man plays the field, he lands as like, oh, he's just having fun, like he's just kind of this player.
Hmm.
But when a woman does the same thing, it's almost like, oh, she's doing too much. She's doing too
Hmm.
much. She's being disrespectful. You're not considering my feelings. You're not considering his feelings. You're not considering his manhood. And that has kind of come up in the undertones
Hmm.
throughout the season, and so I'm
Yeah,
glad that we were able to land here because the villa is rewarding this kind of chase, right? And
of course.
it's interesting when the bombshells came in, especially the women bombshells, especially Soul. She's doing what she's supposed to do. She is also there to find a connection, but she's also there to interrupt and say like, "Hey, you have this connection right now, but you may have a better connection with me." And it's very interesting how she gets framed when she is dumped, and she basically is very honest. She was just like, "This is couples island. This isn't love island." And I was just like, "Well,
Hmm.
she's not wrong.
Yeah.
She's not
I think
wrong."
what's
Yeah.
always interesting about a social experiment
Yeah.
is the things that crop up unintentionally.
Yeah. It is.
Right? And so it's like, this is all just a microcosm,
Yeah.
right, of the broader world that we live in,
Yeah.
right? Parts of it feel different,
Mhm.
right? But some of it is the same, right? I would argue the most important parts are the same, right? And
Yeah.
that is the same idea, right? That like men are rewarded for the chase, right? The idea is that it is what we want and should want, right? To the extent that if men are just like, I just like one woman or want to be with one woman and settled, then they're simps, right? And all that, right? And so, like, yeah, men are rewarded and encouraged and socially
Mhm.
reinforced and punished, right,
Mhm.
into the chase,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And women are punished for chasing.
For chasing, yeah,
Hmm.
and for saying, like, "This is what I want," and then it's too bold or it's too aggressive, that's the
Yeah.
word, and I couldn't find it. "Oh, she's so
Hmm.
aggressive," like, she's
Hmm.
and I'm like, "Is she?" Because she's just being very direct.
Yeah.
She's
Hmm.
saying, like, "I know what I want, I know what I don't.
Hmm.
Are you down or are you not?" If a man were to do that, it's, "Oh, okay," like, he has emotional intelligence because he knows what he wants, which I find very interesting.
Hmm.
And I think
Yeah.
that is the system that we're kind of seeing play out. I
Of
also
course.
wanna say,
Yeah.
like, a lot of these dating shows, like, what I've been seeing, and I think I even started noticing this around Love Island, is that now I mean, to me, I read everything as political. I'm a systems thinker, and you can't be a systems thinker without politics. I do find it interesting that women between that are not even, like, 25, because none of the
Yeah.
women are 25, are so focused on wanting to settle down, have babies, find a person, be married, and like you bringing back to what you said before, they're so young.
Hmm.
I can't say that I didn't want to be partnered when I was in my 20s. I don't know if I was thinking that I want to be partnered and have a white picket fence by the time I'm 25 in my 20s
Yeah.
because I didn't even
That's
know myself in my 20s.
Yeah, that's really interesting to me because it's the kind of thing that feels like there could be many reasons for that. So, like, one
Yeah,
potential reason, right, is there are always one generation swings in one direction,
that's true.
right, and another
Mhm.
generation overcorrects and swings in the other direction, right? And we
Mhm.
are definitely from a generation, you can see this in all the data,
Yeah.
right, that like we got married later, we had kids later, we settled down later, right? Like we are the later generation,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
And so, of course, that feels strange to us. But I also wonder if, like, this crew who was roughly 10 years, 10 to 20 years younger, closer to 20 if you're me, right, than we are, right,
Yeah, that's
also
true.
grew up kind of seeing us move through those processes and had that
Mm,
as a model to respond
yeah,
and react against, right? And so it could
that's
be
very
like a
true.
generational kind of a thing.
I think
It
you're
could
right.
also be, right, that this is what I think I'm supposed to say to be successful on the show. This is what I think America wants me
Mm,
to say, right, as a young
yeah.
woman,
We're in a
right?
very
You know,
conservatism
yeah,
leaning space right now. So yeah,
right?
that's very
Yeah,
true.
right. It could
Mhm.
also be like, this is what I assume these men want to hear,
Want to hear. Mhm.
right? Is
They
that
wanna
I'm
hear
like
that they're
young and
well
fertile
liked.
and I want to have your
Yeah.
babies and right,
Oh
all that, right?
gosh.
And so, and
Oof.
maybe that's right, maybe it's not right. But yeah, that really stands out to me. And I think as we move to wrap, I think one of the other things that really stood out to me about what you're talking about is that what stands out to me about reality TV is that reality TV, by and large, like doesn't have a politic, right? It has a desire to make money.
Yes.
And so it will allow anything that it thinks will make it money, and it will disallow anything that it thinks will get in the way of it making money. And I think
Hmm.
this is how we wind up with all of these like different like gender and sexuality and like race, like toxicity in these spaces, just because
Mhm.
this is not enough, right, to make the masses stop watching the show, right?
No. Yeah.
Colorism certainly is
No.
not,
No, it is
right?
not.
Like
Mhm.
genderism certainly is not, right?
No.
Patriarchy certainly is not. And so, like, we talk about it, and I think that we should talk about it, right?
Mhm.
But I think at the end of the day, like, the reality TV doesn't have any notion to get in the way of any of that or interfere with any of that because it doesn't cost them money.
Yeah, and I think that we are in a time where production knows that race, gender, they even had someone who is disabled on the show, that they know that intersectionality is what the main demographic of Love Island wants to see. So they give it to us. And
Hmm.
then basically they decide, okay, I, I filled the villa with what you wanted. After that,
Hmm.
I gave you what you wanted. So even if you have intersectionality, even if you have diversity, you don't necessarily have inclusion
Yeah, or belonging, right?
or belonging. You
Right.
cannot
Hmm.
force folks to decide who belongs and who doesn't.
Hmm.
Because everyone is already coming in with their own implicit biases,
Absolutely.
right?
Yeah.
You watch Kenzie, speak AAVE around the cast majority of the time.
Heard.
I'm just pissed we in the fucking bottom three. The fuck?
Yeah.
Yeah. Why do you think that is?
I don't know. Maybe it's my heart show. I'm glad we still here though.
I'm fucking glad as fuck.
Yeah.
Another blonde woman comes in who is white. Suddenly, yes, okay, great. I'm
Hmm.
so happy you're here. Now I trust you. Now they're super bonded,
Yeah.
right? Is production leaving things out? Maybe. But Kinsey clearly felt very uncomfortable and finally felt comfortable as we're watching another blonde girl come into the villa. And now you're kind of seeing, I guess some people would call it true colors, but I think you're finally seeing what who probably wasn't used to being around so much color is like, oh, okay, I have something that is comfortable, right?
Absolutely.
So
Hmm.
I don't, this idea that like production is inherently racist or things like that. Well, I mean, the country is inherently racist and the country is inherently biased. So
Hmm.
that's going to come out on these reality TV shows. What they
All the
want
time.
all the time, what they want is what they're getting, which is the discussions, which is the perspective, which is, yep, if I can push your nervous system a little harder, a little harder, a little harder, I'll get what I need so
Yeah,
that
I mean, that's
we
right.
can
I guess
come
you're
back.
welcome, Love Island. We spent a whole hour talking about you
We sure
in
did.
the way
We
that
sure
you
did.
wanted
And
us to.
you're like, yeah, yeah, more. I didn't even think that we were gonna make an hour the way that I don't care for this season,
Yeah.
but we made it work for y'all. But I think this is how we get the true villains of the season, which is the production, and honestly, the whole framework of what reality TV needs to give us. And so, yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Okay, so let's go into. Did you consider this? Because I know we covered a lot, but I will
Yeah.
start with you as the guest to this topic.
Sure. Yeah. Something that you said earlier in our conversation is really sticking with me. And it is this idea of what does it mean to be open to dating? I think that that's
Yeah,
something that I didn't necessarily consider in this same frame, right? Is that
yeah,
it's like, yeah, like it is not actually a requirement that you pick a single person
okay,
and you play whatever is going to happen between the two of you out. And
yeah,
then it didn't work out and you take some time to lick your wounds and now you're ready to jump back in and find a new person and sort of do that linear process with them at the same time, but you do that one person at a time, right? That is a way of seeking love. It is not necessarily the way of seeking love, right? And it's
mm-hmm,
certainly not the only way, right, of
uh-huh.
seeking love. And so that sticks with me, right? That there is value in trying to do this a different way, right? There is value in dating multiple people at the same time and seeing what happens. I think it's important that we're all like clear with each
Clear and
other,
honest
right?
and
Honest,
ethical about
transparent,
it.
right? Absolutely.
Mhm.
But yeah, you can be with multiple people at the same time. You can date casually multiple people at the same time. You can be in multiple relationships at the same time if that's what you want to
Mhm.
do, and that's a normative thing, right? That we can make space
Yeah.
for without necessarily thinking that like, oh, there's something. I mean, I think a word that I see tied to Love Island often is like slutty,
I
right? Which
mean,
is
friend,
gendered in
we
its
are
own
watching softcore
way.
porn a lot of the time.
In many ways,
Many
yes.
ways. It's like a lot.
In
I
many
mean,
ways,
not that I
yes.
don't agree with that specific word, but are we
Yeah.
watching softcore porn a lot of the time? Well, yeah, I do believe we are. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think what this conversation is reminding me of is like that's not a fair characterization of what's going on.
Yeah.
Right. And that even as young as these people are, they are adults, right? And they have the right and the ability to
Yeah.
take their own
They have
romantic and
agency.
sexual empowerment, right? Like into
Yeah.
their own hands and decide
Yeah.
what it is they want to do.
They have
Yeah.
agency to decide if that's what you guys want to do under the sheets
Yeah. Yeah.
and
hmm
in a room full of other folks. Am I
I
judging?
mean,
A
more
little bit,
power
because
to them.
I'm just not that, I'm not that adventurous. So
Yeah. Not
I
for
don't
me.
think I
That's
ever
not for
was.
me, but
Not for me.
good luck, kids.
I love
How
that for
about
y'all.
you? What's your did you consider?
I think as you were talking, something that came up for me is one, this externalization of self-worth, right?
hmm
And then, this idea that like, because what I do as a clinician with individuals is like, I do help people see the value in themselves beyond them being valuable to other people, right? So that they're not depending on this idea of being chosen to feel worthy. I think that helping people value themselves is the exact antidote to a format that turns love into a competition, or this idea that love is a competition. And so I think the villa and the way that production has set it up is it does externalize there's the cast self-worth, the islanders self-worth, not only to each other but to us as well.
Absolutely. hmm Yeah.
Right?
We are, I mean, quite literally voting
We are.
on who should stay and who should go and who should be together.
And we are, and even me, like I can fall into the trap of like, to me, well, I am confidently saying like throw the whole cast away, we'll come back next summer. If you guys found your person, there's no reason to compete.
Well, I'm glad they found their person, I guess.
Yeah, like if you
Yeah.
guys found your person, then what are we do? What are we doing here this season? If you found your
Hilarious.
person, then y'all just need to skip to the end. Let us vote for who's gonna get the money, and then let's start over.
Ridiculous. Ridiculous.
Just let us start over. But I do think that the villa externalizes worth on purpose, and potentially there could be a work of a lifetime to take it back and for yourself. And I think
Yeah.
that's something that I'm sitting with.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah. All right. This was fun. So,
What's
folks,
hey,
if you enjoyed watching this conversation, please like, comment, and subscribe to support the channel. If you're listening, then find us on social media. We want to hear your thoughts about the season of Love Island. Who do you think is the real villain? We definitely want to know, would you compete for love? Tell us what you're seeing in the culture that needs the same lens. You can find me on LinkedIn at Jason L. Herndon, and I also write at summon.substack.
And you can find me at by Philicia on Instagram. You can find my practice page at Village of Sound Mind if you are interested in any of my offerings. And you can also find me writing on liberation letters at byfelicia.substack.com. Jason, you have to tell them what you're offering.
I am now offering a consultation to my fellow licensed therapists. Please come find me. I'll leave the link in the show notes. I'm happy to, this is just a one-time drop-in thing. If that's what you would like, love to chat with you about your cases. If you think you could use someone to sound as a sounding board. The podcast is at the Wait and the Wonder podcast on Instagram and on YouTube at Wait and Wonder podcast. All links are in the description.
Yes, we're also on TikTok. You can find us everywhere. You can email us, like if you want us to talk about something in depth. I got you. I've seen all the episodes. So please let us know. And so I think we gave all our socials. If you're part of the Wonder Club, come be part, come subscribe. We're growing. We're growing. We have 40 subscribers.
We
Thank you
are.
to our 40 subscribers. So yes, we would love to hear from you. But until next time, please hold the wait
And find the wonder.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.